right.
We have online here, I believe, Levi, are you the applicant for the design advice?
Correct.
Okay. Because we have you here, I would like to suggest to the board that we move item 2 up to the number 1 position and do the design advice now, and then we can get back into the work session thresholds, if that's okay with the other members of the board.
I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Okay. So, Mr. Morishon, do you want to take the lead here and tell us about your project?
Sure. So we are planning on putting in 4 homes. I think just last week we finished the recording of those separate individual lots again with the county or the city through Centerline Concepts. They did all that work. And this is the first of the 4 homes that we're going to plan on putting out there. The architect is Outside Architecture, which have already done, I think, 3 or 4 different homes in that area. And so they have experience with the Kanema district, and I thought they'd probably be a good place to start with getting something that would work. And that's the plans that they submitted to me with an attached garage and just, you know, which there's another home down the street that also has an attached garage, and everything as far as that they designed, I guess apparently last few times have fit the criteria. And so I just, before I move forward with the engineering process to finalize that, I just wanted to get some feedback and see if there's any changes, I guess.
Well, I had a couple of questions, and the first one may be for staff, and that is regarding the setbacks that are shown on that drawing.
Would you like me to share the screen?
The one that was just up there. I'm looking at 15 feet in front. Is that normal? Actually, I'm looking at 5 feet on the 4th Avenue side.
Well, it looks like the porch begins, so they're showing where the 5-foot setback is, and then it looks like the porch begins around 10 feet back from the property line. So the house itself looks like it's set back about 15 feet.
Yeah.
Which meets the R6 underlying zoning dimensional standards.
Okay, well, I'm just surprised that the front yard setback is so small. I don't think it's inappropriate given the topography of that property. And I think all of us on the board have been to the property and seen it in the course of dealing with the demolition decision earlier in the year. So we all know how it sits up there on the bluff above the road.
I have a couple of slides, including a street view that I can show if you would like me to share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah,
or I can wait.
If we can walk through it somehow, that'd be helpful, because I've only seen like a couple little glimpses so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Okay, so part of that was we're trying to get the house set back as far as we can, and that's one of the reasons we did the attached garage, so we can set it back. Plus, you're not going to really see that garage because it's the back of the property from the street. And so I don't really think it would detract from visually kind of that whole area. And we also added that 20-foot, I think, pad, just in case somebody had, let's say, 2 cars. One could go in the garage, one could go on the concrete pad, but we could always lessen that pad to, bring it further back. And so that was kind of, we wanted to have a nice curb appeal from the street. And the further that we can set it back, the better, in our opinion. And I think you guys could agree with that. And I think that's where attaching the garage, which you really wouldn't notice anyway, because even if it was detached from the street, you wouldn't see that detachment. It would look the same. And then we can always reduce that pad if it becomes an issue as far as how far we do need to go back.
Okay, thanks. Kelly, why don't you go ahead and show us what you have?
Yeah. Are you guys seeing anything?
Just to zoom.
Okay. Here we go. All right, so, that's not the right PowerPoint. Here we go. All right. So, this is the 4 lots of record. You saw the site plan from the, on the design advice submittal. So it had the one home on it which you approved earlier this year for demolition. And that's the view from the street. So the gravel driveway going up is actually in the 4th Avenue right-of-way. This house is set back what appears to be about 25 feet from the property line. So this is the site plan submitted. We're looking at lot 4 of the 4-lot kind of configuration of these lots of record. And then I've shown the footprint of the house here with the 5-foot measurement. And then it looks like 15 feet. And then over here, I kind of estimated the setback of the home that has been there, and that looked to be about 25 feet. And then you can also see where that gravel driveway sits in relation to the property line. So I have a more zoomed in site plan here so that you can better see the setback measurement numbers. And then elevations, so front and rear, the side elevations. And then I wanted to show you the home that was approved at 708 4th is on the right there are some red arrows drawn on it. And then this house is on the left. And so the one at 708 4th is going to be constructed probably soon. It was approved last year, and it is 2 lots away from this lot. So it's just on the other side of the historic home that's on the other side of Apperson right-of-way. I wanted to bring this up to see if the board had any thoughts about how similar they are. I know that some of the guidelines talk about differentiating styles and, of course, designs. I'm sure the board would want to discuss that along with the attached garage, and then again, maybe the setback. So I am going to go back.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question for the applicant regarding the elevation drawings on the plans that we got. I think your compass is backwards. I think east and west, north and south are the other way around.
I thought the same thing too. That was just me though.
Yeah, so that's a minor detail. But to Kelly's point about the similarity of the 2 houses, there is of course, the sameness in the design of vernacular style houses. So a true to life vernacular style house would look very much like another vernacular style house. But it leads me to the question that was on my mind from the very beginning, and that is, are the other three houses going to be like this one? Are we, in effect, approving 4 plans here? So that's a question for Mr. Morshan.
No, the back 2 houses, because of the nature of the slope on that lot, on those 4 lots, the 2 back ones are going to be completely different design. So they will not look like the front ones at all. And then the one next to this one will have, talking to my architect, I didn't want them to look similar, like I want them to look close and be, fit that historical look, but I didn't want them to be identical. So we were going to change the appearance on the second one, slightly to make it different enough where it's not going to seem like it's the exact same thing. The floor plan might be the same, but the appearance would be different.
Yeah, good. I would like to be clear that in my personal view and as a board member, I wouldn't want them all to be identical. No. So you're taking that in already.
For sure. And we didn't want them to look identical either. We want them to kind of each have their own style or their own kind of look as much as we can within the guidelines of the, historical stuff. But we did want them to look different. We didn't want them to be just like a cookie cutter thing, especially since each one is being designed by an architect specifically to fit that location and to make any changes that maybe somebody might want, but like I said, the back 2 for sure would be different because of the slope and what we potentially are thinking of doing with those back 2.
So when you say potentially thinking of, I'm interpreting that to mean that you're not very far along in the design. Is it your intention to use that access way for those 2 as well as for the front 2? That alleyway that you're creating behind the front 2 lots?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
And we're thinking of doing kind of one at a time. Just, we're not doing all 4 at one time. So we're going to do this first one and then wait till it sells, till we have a buyer, and then possibly move on to the next one. But we weren't going to do all 4 at the same time.
Okay. Other members of the board, can I hear what you think here?
Yeah, so I would echo Ken's comments that for a vernacular style house, I think that it's okay that the general, structure is similar to the other vernacular house. I think if you were to maybe, go pull some of the other vernacular contributing structures on 3rd Avenue, and in the rest of the neighborhood, you might find some different minor elements, different trim profiles on the windows, things of that nature that you could use to just add enough differentiation between that and the adjacent structure that, some of the core elements can stay the same, but enough that it is its own unique, house. Same with, perhaps the porch railing and balusters and that sort of thing, so just some of those decorative elements that will give it a little bit of, differentiation. Definitely the garage situation is I'm a little skeptical of, in previous cases, where we've approved an attached garage, there was super limiting factors on the lot where it was not flat. So there was, it was impossible to get off-street parking without, having the garage attached. In this case, all of that, all those four lots once you're up on the bluff there, it's pretty flat, the entire setup there. So the similar justification that other applicants have used to get that approved wouldn't necessarily apply in this case, in my mind. So I guess we'd have to, look at that closely.
Mr. Stobie.
If the garage were to be detached, Grant, I mean, how would that, and to the applicant, how would that look? Where would you have to setback? I'm looking at a driveway and potentially I believe the back side of that property. I mean, I agree with Grant. Is that something that's going to be doable? So,
as far as setbacks are concerned, the board could grant a preservation incentive if necessary to, make the setbacks work for a detached garage. But as it is a 22 by 22 garage, if you detached it, the rear and side setbacks would only be 3 feet anyway.
okay.
So you could really push it to a back corner if you were to detach it.
Okay.
So what you're saying, in effect, is that we have the geographical constraints, whether or not they're as extreme as those that have caused us to approve prior attached garages is the question.
Are you asking me, Ken?
Well, I'm actually asking Grant and Ray.
Okay. I can pull up a topography map while you guys are talking.
I personally think that the applicant's point about the garage being on the side of the house that's facing away from 4th Avenue is valid, but then we have to bear in mind that Apperson is a public street too.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, is what is going to happen with the is that kind of the existing driveway angle configuration going to stay the same? Is that going to be finished as a public street? Is it going to be kind of like some of the other street right-of-ways where there's a maintenance agreement with the private property owners to maintain it and pave it, or because it might influence how we should approach this?
I think one thing we can do before this comes back to you as a formal application is talk with our Public Works Department to, ask about that, because at this point I don't know if there would be any plan to do anything with Apperson right of way and make it more of a public street or not. But we can bring that information.
I'm not so sure about that, Kelly, and I'll tell you why. The people who were in here for design approval last year for the new home behind the historic home, they were being asked as part of their permit approval to do improvements on Apperson Street. And they wanted to wait for this application so that maybe they could share the cost of that with the others. Now that was, they told me that some time ago, but if one applicant is going to be required to make improvements, then I'm sure that the same will apply on this application. So yes, to Grant's point, there probably will be improvements made to Apperson Street, and it will be a public street. Whether or not the public will actually go up it, I mean, it's a public street now, and the public doesn't go up it, so I don't know.
I can show you the topography map if you would like to see that.
Love it.
Okay. So it's pretty flat, and then the rear property line would be about right here. So the green is showing the slope area that's less than 10%. And then you can see the 2-foot contours on the map as well.
Right. Thoughts, Grant? Ray?
Well, I tend to side with Grant and his point on the garage being, how viewable will that be from Apperson? It looks like with it being pretty flat, it's going to be it will be pretty viewable. Am I wrong, Grant?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure. Maybe I need to go walk down there again and look again, but
yeah.
If we looked at the elevation drawings, we would have the view of it from Apperson. That would be
so Levi, I guess one thing to take away here is that, because the design guidelines specifically call out that garages should not be attached in Kenema, that means that when you submit your formal application, that the onus will be on you to provide justification for why it should be attached. So as much detail as you can provide, you can work out the various scenarios and show, why any of the other options would maybe not be desirable, or work that with your architect for detaching the garage. The more information, the better will help us on our side.
Well, I think on our side, we were trying to maximize room in the front, room in the back by attaching the garage. So I know that if we detach it, it could work, especially if Kelly's saying that our setback back there only needs to be, a few feet. It's doable. It's just going to cut down on, parking space in the back, which if that's what it's going to take, then that's what it's going to take. So, my heart isn't set on one way or the other, but I just felt that attaching it would kind of make sense, because from 4th, you wouldn't notice it. You're right. If it's from Apperson, you would see that it's attached, clearly. But even the way it sits now, if we were going to do minimal improvements to that gravel road and to the way it approaches up there and not really do anything off Apperson, then because these houses are, I think they're about, from where the street level is, they're 10 feet higher. You don't really, it's not super noticeable. But, if that's an issue, I have no problem changing it. It's just going to cut down some of the usable space that we were going to have in the back.
Sure, understood. So I guess what I would say, at least from my perspective, is that within the historical design guidelines, you know, fitting more structure on an amount of property or trying to create more usable space isn't probably a valid justification that we could use to, you know, approve a deviation from the design guidelines, I guess. So, you know, wanting to fit more house, more garage on a smaller lot as opposed to, you know, building one house on a 10,000 foot lot or something like that, wouldn't necessarily be a valid reason for us to deviate from the design guidelines. So I think that would be a hard case to make.
Okay, and then I guess on Kelly's, I just curious, so then what would the separation need to be from the house to the garage?
I think, well, that's a building code issue, and I think it depends on the firewall rating of each structure. I've seen 3 feet and I've seen 6 feet before, depending, but you can check with our building department on that.
Okay. Then I guess my question would be, if we detach the garage, would there be anything else that would be a kind of a red flag issue, or would that kind of cover what you guys would want to see?
My opinion is that detaching the garage satisfies the one major concern that I had with it, because our guidelines, as Grant said, are pretty clear on that. I might make a suggestion for a window on the Apperson Street side, just for the sake of making it look more inhabitable. But
sure,
I wouldn't make that a requirement. Big blank walls tend to look like billboards.
Yeah, other than that, I think the design meets, the rest of it meets the guidelines pretty clearly. Certainly maybe, you know, going the extra mile to look at some of those, you know, minor design elements just to differentiate a little bit would warm my heart a little, but, you know, but it clearly, you know, is appropriate for the district, so.
I don't have any other concerns, but I want to echo that that you might want to look at warming Grant's heart a little bit. That might be a good thing. So
yeah.
and we were actually, like I said, we were wanting to do that to begin with, make them look. We just wanted to get past this initial kind of review of the plans before we move forward with, you know, finishing the plan up and starting the engineering process on it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for sure, that's definitely what we want too.
Well, I think you really brought us an easy design to get along with, and we appreciate that. Anything else?
Why I'm tired not to in that area.
Anything else, board members?
No, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm happy with it.
You feel like you have clear direction then, Mr. Morrison?
I do, yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
We thank you for your time and wish you the best.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for all the information. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
And with that, we can reset the computer and go to item 1 on our agenda to talk about thresholds for HRB review of non-contributing structures, primarily, as I understand it, in the McLaughlin district. You want to bring us up to speed, Kelly? Do you have a staff report on that?
I do. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So you are right, Ken. This is really kind of focused on the McLaughlin district. You know, we talked about, we were calling it, you know, definitions of new construction and demolition, but really what the issue is when do we review changes to non-contributing structures in McLaughlin, and when do we just, you know, let those properties be altered without any historic review? So first I want to just talk about the conservation district and what that means as opposed to a historic district. So Oregon City has two historic districts, but they're different types. So there's the Kenema National Register District. All structures in Kenema are designated, meaning even if a property is non-contributing, any additions to that structure or alterations or demolition is still reviewed by the board. McLaughlin is a conservation district. Conservation districts typically have a lower percentage of significant resources within them, and they're significant more at the local level rather than like the state level or the national level. So McLaughlin has been, it was formed in 1986, and there was another inventory of all of the properties in McLaughlin in 2002. And that inventory found that, you know, there are 301 designated structures. An additional 200 were, because of the time that had passed, additional 200 were identified as potentially contributing. And with that, the district could potentially be eligible for the National Register. But it was not, that was not, no changes were made to the districts to designate those additional 200 structures or to convert the district to a National Register district because owner consent is required, and there wasn't the political will or you know, desire among the majority of the owners, it sounded like, to pursue that. So McLaughlin is still a conservation district. 35% of the structures, or 301, are designated and regulated, while 65% of the structures in the district are not regulated by the board at all, unless they are, unless they get major additions, or if, you know, they're demolished and a new structure is built there. As we review all new construction in McLaughlin. So non-contributing buildings, a lot of the non-contributing buildings in McLaughlin, clearly I just said 200 of them are potentially contributing. Many of them are 100 years old, or, you know, in the period of significance for McLaughlin, but they are, they've been altered to the extent that in 1986, the city didn't recognize them as being contributing anymore. So the non-designated structures are a mixed bag. It's a combination of, you know, ranches or homes built in, you know, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, along with older homes that could potentially be contributing if they were restored back to their original form. So that's a little context. So currently, if you, for a non-contributing structure in McLaughlin, the board does not regulate it whatsoever unless there is an addition that is 30% or more in area to the structure. And then when that happens, it's always reviewed by the board through a type 3 review process, which means it goes to a public hearing. So there are a few issues with how we define that. One is that the word area is kind of vague. How are we measuring that area? Habitable space versus gross floor area. Other issues are that the homes could be significantly modified without quite reaching that 30% threshold. And so a house that was, you know, say built in 1910 had been altered, and so it was not contributing, but it was at least compatible in the district, can become significantly incompatible once, you know, major changes are made. And if those changes don't amount to a 30% addition, then the board would never get the chance to review it. So the example that we looked at before, these are the same slides that we talked about in February. 611 3rd Street is one of those homes that is historic, but it's not designated because of alterations that were made before 1986. And the home was essentially torn. Essentially, there was an addition of 19%, but really it was an entire rebuild. So it was kind of a technicality that allowed this house to not be reviewed by the board. So that's the new facade, and I'm sure it's done by now, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. But I'm sorry, I don't have a recent photo. So, you know, this is the issue that came up and caused the city commission to say, hey, HRB, can you please look at these thresholds for review? Should we change that 30% threshold into something different? So I went through, you might have noticed in your packet that I provided some examples from other jurisdictions. And before I go into that, I just want to quickly review with you that there are different review levels in the state of Oregon. And type 1 review is a staff review with no public notice and no appeal. So that's kind of like when someone in Oregon City, if they meet the HRB policies for something, it's that type 1 review. Type 2 review is a staff review with public notices and a decision that is appealable to the city commission. And then type 3 review is the ones that come to you, public hearings before the historic review board. Those decisions are also appealable. So in Oregon City, all of our historic reviews, either type 1 meets the HRB policies, staff approves it, or it's type 3 and it comes to you. We don't have a type 2 historic review process. Some jurisdictions do, but we do not at the moment. So Oregon City's threshold is explained up there, and along with the 30% threshold, we've got any detached structure. So if someone's building a detached garage, for example, that's larger than 200 square feet gets reviewed by the board. So you recently saw, for example, a 400 square foot garage being added on a non-contributing property in McLaughlin. In Cottage Grove, so I list that whether it's a historic district or a conservation district. So Cottage Grove in the historic district, any additions to historic buildings are reviewed at type 3 level, along with buildings that are next to the designated structures. So if it's not if it's a non-contributing structure that's not directly next to a historic designated structure, then they don't review any additions at all. In Salem, they have a historic district. They review every single addition to a non-contributing building, no matter how small it is. And they have specific standards for those additions. I think regarding height, things like that. So that they're a little more flexible, I think, with their standards and design guidelines when it's a non-contributing building. In Albany, their threshold is 100 square feet for new structures. So while ours is 200 square feet. And they also have a type 3 review for all additions to contributing and non-contributing buildings, only if it was constructed before 1945. So that must be their period of significance cutoff. And if the non-contributing structure was built before then it comes to their board for review. In Corvallis, they review it unless it doesn't exceed the existing height of the structure. So the example that we looked at with the 611 3rd Street, I think it was, where the height increased significantly, you know, that one would be reviewed in Corvallis. Or if it's above 200 square feet, it gets reviewed. So that's the same threshold as Oregon City, although their additions to structures, if they're greater than 200 square feet, they get reviewed. And then also, if they're detached structures greater than 200 square feet, they get reviewed. So it's not a percentage basis, it's a flat number. Portland has a conservation district. This is the only one that is based on a conservation district and not a historic district. So they have type 1 and type 2 reviews, and then some additions to non-contributing structures are exempt if they are less than 150 square feet and they're on the back of the house, for example. So I actually happen to live in a conservation district. We added a small addition on the back of our house, less than 150 square feet, and we, I believe, went through a type 1 review. So that's just an example. In Portland, they have several conservation districts where this applies. So these additions never, for non-contributing structures, never go to any sort of commission or board. It's always a staff level review, but if it's over 150 square feet, then it gets a public notice and is appealable. And so they have standards, you know, kind of specific standards and guidelines for these type 1 and type 2 reviews, kind of similar to our HRD policies. So I know that's a lot, and I kind of went through it very quickly, but I will, I'm going to move on because I have kind of discussion questions at the end, but feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions. Major public improvements. So this is just another kind of piece of this that I think the Commission, I think everyone wants us to kind of clarify what major public improvements are. So the scope of this review that we're being asked to do includes these non-contributing structures and then also major public improvements within historic districts. And this would apply to Kenema and McLaughlin. So major public improvements is when the city makes any sort of change in the physical character of the district, or when we issue a permit for someone to make private improvements in the right-of-way, for example. So this would include streetscape projects, park renovations or new equipment in a park, curb bump outs. Could include signage, street markings, new traffic signals, alterations to public buildings, and even could include tree removal on public land. Some of these items the board has reviewed in the past as a major public improvement, and some of these items have never come up to the board, whether because they have never happened or because we have not been applying this consistently over the last however many years that it's been in place. So I think the question is going to be, and I'm not asking for any answers today, but I think the question is going to be, you know, what do we want to change this definition, or do we want to clarify what we mean by physical character, change to the physical character of land? Because some of these things might be minor enough that you wouldn't want them to come to you for a type 3 review. And then some of them would be major, it really would be major, and you would want to review them. The example of that, I think, in the recent past is the 7th Avenue Streetscape project that the board reviewed. I think we could probably all agree that that is a major public improvement, but some of the other items that have come to you, you know, maybe they are not quite at that threshold. So the questions for the board, knowing that we're going to kind of move forward with some community engagement and outreach on this and potentially look at code amendments, and we would get started on that this fall. Questions right now for you are, do you suggest adding any specific jurisdictions for us to compare in that table? Do you see any options in the table that you'd like to consider as we move forward? And do you see any of those options or examples from other jurisdictions that you don't think are right for Oregon City? And then what did I miss?
Okay. Oh, I don't know. I might need those questions up here. My memory isn't that long. If we went back to your first slide here, well, actually the first slide was a picture of the house, but the first text where you described the thresholds currently, it's about 2 slides back.
Yeah. Oh, 2 slides back.
That's, don't wait a minute.
This one?
Yep. Nope, one more. Nope, one more. I can't count beyond 2, so that's the one. That's the one I was talking about. Because we could add some values to some of these bullet points to make it specific instead of vague, and clarify that a project like the one on 3rd Street probably should have come to the board for review. If these bullet points had quantities attached to them.
Oh, sorry, this wasn't clear on my slide, but the bullet points are not part of the code or part of the definition.
Okay.
Those are just, those are the issues that stem from this vague definition.
Well, are we talking code or HRB policy?
I think what we're probably looking at is a change in a change in the threshold for review of non-contributing. So right now it's 30% up here, 30% and 200 square feet. So whether we, I think it's semantics, whether we put it in a definition or we add a new section of code, but really we just, I think, want to look at whether we should change that threshold from something other than 30% or 200 square feet and make it, similar to what one of those other jurisdictions had, like a square footage threshold potentially instead of a percentage threshold, or maybe it's about height, or maybe it's about where the addition is on the building. And again, we're not trying to answer it right now, but I was just looking for direction on, did you see anything that looked like it was compelling and you'd want us to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward? And then did you see have any thoughts or see any examples that just looked like would never work in Oregon City?
For sure. I can see why the commission asked us to look at this. if that's the question, should we look at it? My vote would be yes. And I don't think it takes a major revision to do that. Clarify when we're talking about 30% increase, is that increase in the footprint or increase in the habitable square footage? A height limitation, I think, should be in there. But 200 square foot seems to be a good threshold, but the vagueness of whether that's in the footprint or the overall square footage needs to be clarified. So.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to do all the talking here. I want to hear from other board members.
Yeah, so on the first question was other districts we should look at, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, I don't know if Aurora has value. I don't really pay too much attention to them, but I drive through there all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm not sure how good their review process is or not. First glance, the Corvallis rules look kind of simple but effective, but maybe only effective for this specific thing we're thinking about, this house. So I don't know. I forget what the other questions were.
You scroll to it.
There.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that we could exclude some things for the public improvements, whether they be, like standard street signs, like, stop signs, I don't know, things of that, speed limit signs. I think we could probably, make it clear that those things don't need to come to the board. But other, major signage or something, designating the neighborhood or something maybe should, I don't know.
Yeah, we talked during the reconstruction on Center Street, we talked about the curb flares and some of the other things that were going on there. And I think that was appropriate. Ray?
The only thing I have to add to that really is just an echo of Grant and sticking with or looking at Corvallis.
Okay. So the one, sorry, I can't find it now. There we go. So out of all of those, Corvallis looks potentially promising. We'll look at Aurora, and there might be other jurisdictions that we find have some good options too. But what I will let you know, as far as next steps, this fall and winter we'd be doing community engagement in a virtual manner. So interviews, which might be interviews with you all individually or as a group, focus groups, surveys of, the affected property owners, and then, the city, McLaughlin district folks, and, the general public as well. We want to make sure to consult with our legal team on what we can legally do without owner consent, because I know we can't. One thing I have been told that we can't do without owner consent is review demolition of non-contributing structures. So we'll consult with them, we'll do additional research on the other jurisdictions, and then we can draft up some code amendments for your review. And then in winter, spring would be the time where we would have the public hearings for any code amendments that you all recommend.
Yeah, in looking at the only reason I looked at Portland for guidance was because they were the only one on the chart that had a conservation district. But I think they have a whole different set of issues from what Oregon City has. And I just don't see looking to their program for guidance. I don't think there's anything there that they can help us with. My opinion.
Yeah, I kind of had the same thought in the back of my mind that some of the logic behind the way they have their process set up probably has more to deal with the size of the city and the amount of reviews and things than maybe the situation we have in here.
Yeah.
One other comment to throw out, and maybe this should be a whole separate topic for an agenda or something, but related to public improvements, the issuance of, revocable right-of-way permits such that are currently under consideration for Kenema. I don't think there's any point in hiding that I don't know, I'm personally pretty disgruntled and not very happy with the entire situation around the way that's been handled so far. And so certainly, I don't know, I think that's something that maybe we should look at how, the impact on the historic and contributing properties and the district.
I can say that your view, Grant, is shared by a good many people in the Kenema Neighborhood Association as far as being disgruntled about the process.
Certainly, I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea of, if Public Works were to assign some revocable right-of-way permits, that giving some implicit, approval. If people that were to receive those thought that meant that there was some sort of, historic review board type approval, or that the overall city had approved what is in the right of way, or whichever, I think we need to be careful of there. So.
Right.
Okay.
Anything else? Did you find out what you needed to know, Kelly?
Yeah, no, this is helpful, and I mean, it sounds like you all agree that we should consider changing our thresholds, and so we'll go ahead and move forward with that. So you will see that in the fall, and I don't know exactly what that community engagement looks like yet. I think what we have the CLG grant funds. And we're planning to use those to hire an intern to help us with community engagement and some of the research. And so I would want to let that intern kind of shape what that looks like. And so we will move forward with kind of advertising for that position. It's going to be a little odd doing everything remotely over video and phone, but we'll make it work. We do also have, for this item, yes, that is all I needed, unless you had any other thoughts before we kind of start moving forward on it.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So
thank you.
The only thing I would clarify is that we're not looking so much, I think, at creating a different standard, but rather quantifying exactly what our standard is.
Yeah, I think we're quantifying when the board would review something,
Right.
right? So the design guidelines that we have are going to apply if the board reviews it. Or I guess if it becomes a staff review, the guidelines would apply. So we're not looking to change our design guidelines. We're just looking to change when do we look at these non-contributing structures? How much can those be altered before the Historic Review Board needs to get involved?
Right. Okay. If we're clear on that, we can go on to HRB meeting minutes. So Grant and Ray, have you read the minutes, taken a trip down memory lane for April and May, May and June last year? And I did also. It was exciting.
Yeah.
So, did anybody find anything that needed to be corrected or amended?
I did not know.
I didn't see anything either.
In that case, I would entertain a motion for ratification of the meeting minutes for April 2019 work session, April 2019 public hearing, and the public hearings for May 2019 and June 2019.
Well, then in that case, then I move to ratify the minutes for the April 2019 work session and for the public hearings for April, May, and June of 2019.
Then I'll second that.
And I'll let Kelly poll the board then.
Board Member Stobie?
Aye.
Board Member Blythe?
Aye.
And Chair Basinger?
Aye. And now we're at communication. Oh, by the way, I'm not the chair of the HRB. I just play one on television. I used to be, but I'm not.
Thanks for doing that, Ken. That's actually one of my communications items.
Okay, good.
But I'll wait. Do board members have any before I jump in?
No.
Not I.
Okay. So John McLaughlin, his term ended last month. So we very much appreciate his time on the board. But we now have 4. We're down to 4. And he was our chair. So Ken, thanks for stepping in to be chair today. And I think next meeting we will just have an election for chair for the end of till the end of the year, I guess. And we have advertised for this opening on the board since I think January, but we haven't had any anything come in. But we did have a few good applicants last year that applied for the open position on the board last year. And so we can reach out. I plan on reaching out to those folks to see if they are interested still. So we might be able to appoint someone soon, or we would just have to wait until we find someone else. But if you all know anyone who might be interested and just waiting to get on the HRB, please send them my way. My second announcement is there's a National Alliance of Preservation Commissions forum or conference that's happening next month, and it's all online this year. And the conference fee is greatly reduced because of that. So I sent you all an email a couple of weeks ago, but it's August 3rd through August 9th. Our grant from SHPO can cover the registration fee for you. So even if you only see, 1 or 2 of those sessions that you're interested in or that you have time to watch, we can still cover your fees for that. It's only $100 per person. So I'm clearly not going to have the ability to take the entire week and attend every session that's being offered. But there are a significant number of really compelling looking sessions that I emailed to you. So if you're at all interested, just let me know, email me, and our grant can cover your registration fee and I can get you registered. So that applies for HRB members and staff that work on historic review. And that is starts next week, so let me know soon. And I'll just send the email again tomorrow so that you have it fresh in your inbox.
Okay, good. I can tell you I will not be attending. I'm going to be floating the Salmon River in Idaho next week, so communication is tough there.
Have fun.
I'll take a look
Thank
at my
you.
schedule and let you know.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all I had.
Anything from anybody else? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Ken.
Thanks, everybody.
Brent.